Welcome back to the Radiant Glow Up podcast, where we stay super consistent and have filmed for 4 weeks in a row. Yay! No, but seriously, I'm so proud of myself for staying consistent for this whole time. Not gonna lie, I was debating not doing one this week because I'm a little bit hungover. Not the most ideal situation to be filming a video like this, but I made a promise to myself that I was gonna stay consistent with the podcast this time. So here I am, god damn it. I feel like shit, but let's get on with it. So I'm not gonna lie to you, I saw some YouTube analytics that made me a bit sad. I talked about it in one of my TikToks, and I ended up having a really good conversation with my partner. The main focus of my podcast should be improving it so that you enjoy it, rather than looking at these analytics and thinking, why aren't people enjoying it? Just, it's more productive to think, what can I do to change this podcast to make it better for you to watch? So that's what I'm doing today. We had a good conversation, and I've decided that this week I'm going to make it a bit shorter. YouTube analytics, not going into detail, but it kind of showed me that people don't necessarily want to watch a really long video of the podcast. And I'm really focusing on my YouTube right now. Obviously, listening on Spotify, you probably want a longer one. Maybe not. Let me know. But I want the YouTube to work out. So I'm gonna try and film shorter videos, see if that works. Please let me know what you like, because I think social media can be quite a silent audience sometimes. You put out content and you don't necessarily get feedback. But I would love to know if you prefer shorter podcasts, longer podcasts, and also a lot of my podcasts, obviously, it's always going to be my experience because it's just me talking. But whether you prefer the podcast to be in the style of me telling you life stories and you relating to them or not relating to them, or this podcast is going to be themed more about taking my experiences and giving you advice. So, whichever one you prefer, please let me know. So, on that note, this week's podcast, I'm going to be talking about how you can improve your work life now, or ASAP, because some of it does take a little bit of work. A bit of a disclaimer to start with. Of course, because it's just me talking, this is going to be from the perspective of hospitality and things like that. Obviously, not everyone's hospitality experience is the same either. So please take what I say with a grain of salt. I mean, if you can take anything away from the video, I'll be really happy. But if this doesn't apply to your industry or this doesn't apply to your workplace, I'm really sorry, but it's the only perspective I have. Anyways, let's get into the meat, the bread and butter. Let's get into it. If you find yourself in a situation like I did, where you're in a job, you're kind of getting bad vibes from it, you're starting to get a bit miserable, or you're very much miserable, but you can't quite figure out why, there's just bad vibes, or maybe there is something that you know makes you miserable, but you have no idea where to start. I think the most helpful thing for me, anyway, was to just evaluate my job as a whole. So, for example, why do you do the job that you do? Are you doing your job because you need money? Are you doing your job because it's really rewarding for you? Are you in that particular job because of the particular people that you work with? Like, what is your motivation for that job? Why do you do it? And then also your job role. If you were to see an advert for your job on Indeed, does the description of that job match up with what your job actually is? That was a huge thing for me when my job ended up morphing into something completely different to what it started out as. And I genuinely found an advert for my job on Indeed, and reading the description was absolutely hilarious because I was like, that is not what the job is at all. Well, that's not what it was like for me. And I was like, oh my God, I could have been doing way less than what I was doing, and I didn't even realize. I think that it's a really important one in particular because I think it's super easy to just go with the flow, go with the motion of your job, your expectations of your from your boss get higher and higher, and you just match up to those expectations because, I mean, that's your boss, you do what you're told, and your job ends up morphing into something way more than what it started. And for me, that is what made me so miserable, is because I kept having to meet these expectations and meet these high hours and do all of these things when that's not what I signed up for in the first place. That's not the job that I signed up for, and it ended up being really stressful. Another thing I had to ask myself was, why do I go above these expectations? So I think this question for me was a little bit different to why do you do your job? It's, why are you meeting these expectations and going above for your job? There was a few reasons. I'm a people pleaser. I don't want to make my bosses unhappy. I don't want to give them a reason to replace me, to fire me, to shout at me. So I just kept matching these expectations to make them happy. And also, being in a manager type role, the people that I worked with were my best friends, and I wanted to make that environment as good for them as possible. And I ended up sticking my own neck out and stressing myself out to meet these expectations and to make my friends happy because I love them and I want them to have a really happy workplace. But I ended up being miserable. If you're asking yourself these questions and you can't really figure out what it is exactly, I'm going to give you some examples of what made the job miserable for me, and hopefully it'll help you identify. As always, I have notes off to the side because brain no worky and I need to read it. What I identified that made me unhappy was high stress because we were severely understaffed for a really long time, no breaks, way too many hours, sometimes really shitty people, and the expectations not matching up. This advice I'm about to give you, I've been very lucky in my new job that I've had bosses who are willing to communicate with me and I'm in a much healthier environment. However, I'm fully aware that some of you may not be in that same situation. So, again, take what I say with a grain of salt. So, if you work somewhere that is super busy and you have a severe lack of staff and it's really stressful every day, there's not much you can help there. There's certain situations where, say, if you've got really shitty customers, there's not much you can do about that because, I mean, that if there's anyone that you cannot convince to be nice people, it's dickheads in hospitality. If they come in as a dickhead, there is nothing you can do to change that. The only thing that would help is to change your own mindset. The situation that you're in, whether it's really busy or you've got dickhead customers or there's not enough of you to get the jobs done, your mindset is the only thing that you can change, that you can control, and that will help you in that situation. Except if you're a manager. If you're a manager, hire more people, please. So the mindset change that I had is that you can only do your best. That, I feel like it can be such an overused term, and a lot of the time when I hear that, I'd be like, right, so you can only do your best, but how is that gonna help? Because there's still a queue of people out the door, there's still a pile of dishes over here, and everything's a mess and I'm freaking out. Like, I can only do my best. Yeah, but my best isn't enough. If you're in a situation where there's queues out the door, there's wait on food, there's dishes everywhere, if you're stressed about it, that isn't gonna help. I know when I'm stressed, I I basically drown. I feel like any problems that customers have, I'm not able to deal with it as well because I'm too busy stressing about it. Whereas if I'm a bit calmer about the situation, I'm more able to help the customer and I have my head screwed on properly and I'm able to solve these problems. I'm also able to spot problems and fix them before they become problems. But if I'm too stressed out about what's in front of me, I'm not I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not trying to troubleshoot. I'm not trying to fix problems before they become problems. I'm just freaking out about this stupid dickhead customer in front of me who needs help. If you're in a stressful situation, it's not going to change whether you're stressed or whether you're not stressed. And being not stressed allows you to do the best job that you can. And that's all you can do. And I know what some of you are thinking. I don't have time to think or breathe. I just need to do my job. One thing that benefited me so much is if you have a customer in front of you and you just need to take a second, Just pretend you're gonna go get some till roll. Honestly, that has saved me multiple times where I just need just a second to gather my thoughts, recoup, to go back into battle. What I do is I say, just give me 1 second. I just need to grab a till roll or something, or I need to grab something. I will like school to the office or go into a drawer underneath, just sit there out of view and go, right. Then you can go back to the customer and be like, hi, how can I help you? Cappuccino, latte, bacon bath? Cool. That'll be this amount. Print ticket, put up, done. Do that like 20 times over. Your job will be so much easier. Sometimes I'm at the till and I'm like, oh shit, I need to make sure I'm doing this. Oh my God, I'm thinking about the dishes over there and I'm thinking about a person over there doesn't look happy. And then the person I'm trying to serve in front of me, I'm not doing a very good job. Whereas I'm now just focusing, right, I need to serve customer, I need to get money from customer, customer needs to get coffee. Bam, 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 I'm doing the best that I can do. The most important one for me has been managing expectations versus reality in my job. When I changed jobs, I made sure to make it super, super clear to my new employer that the situation that I had been in before was not gonna happen in this one. I made sure I was upfront with them and I told them, "I feel like I've been taken advantage in my old job, and this is why, and if I'm gonna be hired as front of house here, I am just going to be front of house." 'Cause I think, especially when you've been somewhere a long time, you can be given a lot of responsibilities that are outside your normal job role, and your expectations can go a lot higher because you're more experienced, you're loyal, they know you're a good worker, and people can take advantage of that, and they definitely did in my old job. So I made it very, very clear from the get-go what my expectations were of the front of house job, and I made sure to make it clear from their end what they expect of me from front of house and to make sure that those match up. And following on from that, make sure that they continue to match up no matter how long you've been in the job. I've been in this job for like 3 months now, and I've already had multiple conversations with my bosses to make sure that the expectations are still matching up. And if they don't, I make sure to let my bosses know that, I think that you asking me to do this thing is a step above what the expectations were, and I'm not comfortable with that. And I know, coming from a people pleaser, that sounds really daunting to be like, you've asked me to do a job and I'm not going to do it. That is my worst nightmare. But keeping open communication with your bosses and letting them know that, hmm, actually, I think that what you're asking me to do is more of a supervisor manager type job, and then letting them let you know that, "Oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is more of a supervisor job," or, "No, I actually think this is within your job role because." I've had really good conversations where I think that this is above my job role. They don't believe it is. We come to a compromise. We're both happy and we both carry on. The mistake I made in my old job is not letting them know those little jobs that are above my job role. And they piled up, and I got more stressed and more miserable to the point where it was too far gone. I had to leave my job because it got to a point where the expectations were so high and so big that I just couldn't hack it anymore and I had to leave. So make sure you don't let it get that far. If there's anything that you're sort of like, that's kind of a bit above what I would like to do from my job, make sure you let them know. It's a lot easier to let your bosses know about these little jobs rather than you get so miserable and have so much work piled on top of you that it ends up coming up in this explosive conversation. And from my perspective, I ended up doing a lot of hours, not because I needed the hours, but because I wanted to please my bosses and I wanted to look like a golden worker who could do all of these hours to do them a favor, hoping that that would benefit in any way for me. Spoiler alert, it did not benefit me in a single way except my paycheck at the end of the month. But it got to a point where I was working so many hours and I was so burnt out that I didn't give a fuck about the extra money. So another thing that I sat down and evaluated was, how much money do I need to live? How much extra money would I like to have? And working the hours that I need for that, is it worth doing in my current job? I'm not sure if I'm making sense. I'll put it into some context. So for me, in my job, I was working between 50 and 55 hours every week. I did not need that much money to live. I could have worked 35 to 40 hours and had a really comfortable wage. But the reason that I was working so much is because we were super, super short staffed. And I felt like if I didn't step up and take those hours, that my bosses would feel like I wasn't capable and that I wasn't a team player, etc., etc. So I sat down and I realized I don't need to be burning myself out. I don't need that much money. Why am I working these extra hours? And obviously, I figured out that I was working these extra hours because I'm a fucking people pleaser and I was burning myself out with no benefit to me. And I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. It just so happened that because we were short staffed, I wouldn't have been able to take less hours. I was just in a situation where if I wanted less hours, I would have had to find another job, which I did. And let me tell you, doing 20 less hours has changed my life. I've still got enough money to live and have extra cash. I'm just not dealing with the extra hours that burnt me the hell out. So if you are in a situation where you're able to do that, I would highly recommend it. If you're not doing the hours because you have to, you don't need to do them. You can find a job that gives you less hours if that is something that you're able to do, of course. On the same sort of lines as people pleasing, not taking your breaks. I used to say, nah, I don't really need a break. I can continue working, basically as a favor. If there's stuff that needed to be done, I'd be like, I don't need a break. Take the damn break. You have a right to have a break during a day, and even just a couple of minutes outside can make such a difference. What I'm about to tell you may sound weird, but it has saved me in so many stressful situations where I couldn't have a break. Go to the toilet. People can't tell you can't go to the toilet. If you're about to piss yourself, people can't say you're not allowed to go to the toilet. I mean, obviously, if you're in the middle of serving a customer or, you know, don't be stupid. But if there's a chance, you can just sit down on a toilet undisturbed for like 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. Take it. Even if you don't need the toilet, there have been many a situation where I've just said, oh, I need to nip to the toilet. And all I've done is just sat down and just gathered my thoughts. It is so helpful. It goes hand in hand with the whole you can only do your best thing. I've taken so many opportunities just to sit there and be like, okay, this is really stressful. What are the things that I need to do to make this easier for me and to get the job done? Being in the toilet is the toilet is a sanctuary to gather your thoughts and to reevaluate what the fuck you're doing. But also, if someone offers you a break, take the damn break. You're not doing anyone a favor by saying, nah, it's fine, I don't need it. Even if you feel like you don't need it, just take it. I want to talk about some core boundaries that I've come up with for myself that keep things in check, keep me happy in my job, and also keep my bosses happy. First one I kind of touched on earlier, and it's only doing things that are within my job role, or if they're going above my job role, I'm either getting compensated for it or I just want to do it for myself. Another one that goes hand in hand with that is not doing any work until I clock in, and I don't clock in until the start of my rotated shift. This one is super important to me because in my old job, if I came in early, I used to just do things to help people out, but it didn't benefit me and it made my workday that much longer. And I wasn't even clocked in for it, so I wasn't even getting paid for it. I realized that when managers make rotas, they think about, oh, how busy is this day going to be? How many people do we need on shift, and what time do we need them to start to make sure that this shift runs smoothly? So that's what they need to think about with their rota. And if they haven't planned properly and they've got stuff to do that they can't do and they need your help with before your rota to start, that's on them. If you say no, you're not obligated to fix their mistakes in that way, if that makes sense. Like, I used to be guilt tripped to start early because they're like, oh, but we really need help with this. We're not going to get it done in time. Sorry, that's not my problem. That's your bad planning. Obviously, I wouldn't say no every single time, but I'm a lot more firm with that boundary than I was in my last job, and it's helped me so much. If I'm like 10 minutes early, I will just go and sit with my cup of coffee, and I will only start doing my job once I've clocked in and once I've started my rotated shift. I remember one time I started at 9:30 and it was 27 minutes past 9, and my boss asked me, "Oh, could you start doing the cakes?" I was like, no, I'm gonna go to the toilet. I start." And they were like, "When do you start?" I'm like, "Half past." And they were like, "It's half past." And I was like, "I've still got 3 minutes. I'm gonna go outside. I will start that job in 3 minutes." Obviously, some bosses may think you're a dick for that, but I just think it's totally worth it because they just can't take advantage of you. It starts off with 3 minutes, then it turns into 5 minutes, then it's like, "Oh, well, you're here 10 minutes early. You're already here. Can you help me with this?" And then it just goes on and on and on. Nip that shit in the bud. If you're on the clock, do the work. If you're not on the clock, go and sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee. Along the same lines as that, clock out when you're finished. I think it's only fair that if you don't do work until you're clocked in, as soon as you finish your work, clock out. It just means that I'm trying to work with my bosses, like if I'm not going to do work for 3 minutes before my shift, I'm not going to just wander around after I'm done and not clock out at the end of my shift. I would say the one thing to take away from this is this. Don't be afraid to have those conversations with your bosses or higher ups or whoever you speak to. I was always afraid of having these conversations because I didn't want them to think that I couldn't cope and that I wasn't capable and I was difficult in any way. But it's always worth having the conversation. I think overall, my relationship with my bosses now are really good because I make sure to keep open communication with them all the time. They know that they can trust me to come to them when there's a problem. They don't have to guess. They don't have to bring me up being like, "You're not doing your job very well. You seem very miserable. What's wrong?" Because I'm always telling them if there's something wrong. Also, I always used to think that, oh, that problem's really small. It's not worth bringing up. It's always worth bringing up because those smaller issues can snowball and turn into the bigger issues that make you want to leave your job. Always have the small conversations, always fix the little things, and it will make your life so much easier and it will make you so much happier in your job, I promise. To give you an example, I so right now I'm just front of house. I'm not a supervisor, I'm not a manager in any kind of way. I'm just front of house. And an incident happened in work where my boss expected me to make a decision by myself and I made it clear. I said, "I understand where you're coming from. However, in that situation, there wasn't a manager around, so I just enforced what I was told. I was told that this was the rule, so that's what I enforced. I don't feel like I'm in the position to make those kinds of decisions because I'm just front of house. If I was a supervisor, I probably would have made that decision, but I'm not. So I'm not in the position to change anything. I'm not in the position to make any of those decisions." And my boss was like, "Okay, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Next time, I'm telling you that this is what you should do if you're in that situation again." Easy fix. I communicated that I feel like I wasn't in the position to make that decision. My boss thought that I should have made that decision because of my prior experience. And then we met in the middle where he's like, "Okay, as your boss, I'm telling you that if you're in that situation again, this is how you should handle it." And now me, as front of house, I know that if I'm in that situation again, this is how my boss wants me to handle it. So I'm doing as I'm told and I'm not having to make any decisions. Whereas if I had just stewed in that anger, if I had just said, yeah, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have done that thing, I should have done this instead, I'm really sorry, I would have just rolled over onto my stomach and be like, tell me off, I'm really sorry. But in my head, I would have been like, I didn't make that decision because I don't feel like I should have to because I'm not a manager. And that would have led on to resentment to my boss. He would still think that he can still have those expectations of me, and it would have been a whole mess again. So, overall, make sure you're keeping that open communication with your boss and don't be afraid to bring up the little things. In spirit of keeping the podcast short, I'm deciding to end it here. It feels really weird to not keep chatting. I think I've hit all the points I want to. If there's any other advice that you think would be useful in these kinds of scenarios, DM me, I'd love to know, and maybe I'd do a second part. Also, as always, if you want to have a discussion with me about anything I've said, if you've got a different opinion to mine, I'd love to hear it. I'm not gonna lie, this is like my 10th time recording this bit because I keep giving myself the ick. But if I'm gonna take this podcast seriously, I need to promote it. So I'm just gonna fucking do it, okay? If you know anybody who would enjoy this podcast, who would benefit from listening to this podcast or watching in any way, even if you know anybody who needs a podcast to fall asleep at night or who likes having a podcast on in the background, share this one with them. I would really, really appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you've got any feedback, let me know, and I'll see you next week. Bye!